Hello and welcome everyone to Gurukul Online Learning Network. Today we are going to be covering World School Debating Championships or WSDC format and the roles of the different speakers in it. Today we are covering the Deputy Prime Minister and the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Their burdens are quite the same. I am Aian Adib, and without further ado, let's get started. So, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Deputy Leader of Opposition are the third and fourth speakers of the debate, and as such you can see that the Prime Minister and the Leader of Opposition come in, characterize the debate, give the stakeholders, set a burden on them, and then they basically fix the debate into which way it is going to go. So as the Leader of Opposition and the Prime Minister have talked about some stuff, the third speaker or the Deputy Prime Minister has the burden to come in and say what the Leader of Opposition has done wrong. So the advantage here is that the Leader of Opposition is going to come in and give you arguments that are going to play out in the debate. And so as the Leader of Opposition comes in and gives you a characterization or a burden or stakeholders, if you think it's unjustified, you can come in and call it out. But remember, you cannot come in and recharacterize the debate. You can come in and challenge their burdens. You can come in and say how their characterization is unjustified, or you can come in and say their burden is too specific and this does not play into the debate. And as such, you can just take their burden and make it your own as well. So make sure as the third speaker, the Deputy Prime Minister, you are tackling whatever the Leader of Opposition has talked about, because your Prime Minister can't come in and just take it and just rebut it because the Prime Minister's speech is gone. And so this is on the third speaker to come in and talk about what the Leader of Opposition has said. And this is specific to the third speaker, because the fourth speaker does not have to come in and talk about the characterization or burden, since the Leader of Opposition has done it already. Now you can come in and also do what the third speaker does, but I would suggest against it, because if the debate is all about where the burden lies or where the characterization is or who the stakeholders are, this isn't a proper debate. This isn't a debate on arguments. This is a debate on where the debate should occur, and this takes a lot out of debate. So make sure at the fourth speaker, you can just come in and say that these are unjustified, but don't talk so extensively about them that they become the main core of the debate. The debate is about the arguments. The debate is not about where it should occur, when it should occur, or what the stakeholders are and who are affected. So make sure as both the third and fourth speaker, just if it's good enough, accept it. There is no problem in accepting a characterization or a burden if it plays into your account. But if it's like, as mentioned, if it's straw manning or squirreling, make sure to call it out, because that plays a lot into your marks, and that shows why your debate is going to be much better than the opposition. So never straw man or squirrel. I will repeat it as much as I want, because it is very important. And then, so the third and fourth speaker, they also have a specific structure. The structure is, to be honest, much more lenient than the Prime Minister and the Leader of Opposition, but that does not mean that they can just come in and talk about whatever they want. They need to follow a set structure as well, and the structures are mostly three-layered. So without further ado, let's get into the structure. First of all, this is very important, as the third and fourth speaker are the main person to rebut after the arguments are given. So let's imagine, this is one thing that I love to imagine. Arguments are like pillars to a building. So as the debate progresses, everyone tries to make the pillars much better than the opposition, because in the end, the pillars of the building that are more developed will last more than the ones that are broken. So if you come in and give their arguments from the Prime Minister, your pillars are built. Then the leader of opposition comes in and tries to break your pillar. And as such, if you, as the Deputy Prime Minister, come in and don't even try to tackle their arguments, the pillars are built. The leader of opposition comes in, builds their pillar, breaks your pillar. If you come in and just ignore it, the pillars are built, the foundation is set, and you cannot cut it from the core. If the leader of opposition comes in and gives an argument, make sure it is imperative that you rebut it to your best ability, because in the end, the leader of opposition cannot give you the very max of the arguments. It's just one. And now, and for the fourth speaker though, the fourth speaker has a much more set argumentation, because the Prime Minister has talked about the argument, which has been broken a little by the leader of opposition. Then the Deputy Prime Minister comes in and gives them the chunk of the argument, the most important arguments, because in the end, the Deputy Prime Minister carries most of the burden to give the arguments to you. Because, and another reason, whips cannot give arguments. I will talk about that when we are taking the whip session. But right now, remember that whips cannot give our new arguments. As such, the arguments end after the Deputy Prime Minister's speech. So make sure, as the Deputy Leader of Opposition, you are coming in and rebutting their arguments as a whole. Their arguments have been set out. Their arguments have been laid out. The pillars, the foundation have been made. You, as a builder, should come in and break their pillars to the best of your ability. And as such, rebutting is one of the most important tasks of the deputies as a whole. Second, after you've done your rebuttal, make sure you rebuild your arguments or reassure it. What do I mean by this? As the pillars have been broken, the analogy that I'm going with, the pillars that have been broken, you need to, as the second builder, come in and fix them, right? Because if you leave them as is, no one is going to take care of the building, and the foundation itself will be very bad. And as such, the building may be broken before it even starts to take place. So make sure you come in and reassure your arguments. What am I talking about here? So as the Deputy Prime Minister, the leader of opposition came in and gave you rebuttals, right? So you need to come in and rebut their arguments. Then you need to show that your arguments are still standing. So what do I mean by this? So if they come in and say that we need to talk about the general people also, and say that their arguments only focuses on this specific sector of people, you can come in and say that even if they talk about this whole general overview and how it's sort of injustice to the general people, you can come in and talk about how, even if they say this is an injustice to the general people, how it's still important to the debate because this injustice is required for what they went through. This is very important, as you're keeping your pillars more intact and not letting them break down that easily. Now, as the deputy leader of opposition, you need to come in and reassure or rebuild as well, because the deputy prime minister, unless they come in and completely ignore your arguments and provide their own arguments, you have a breakage in your pillar. And you don't want that. You don't want them to come in and just take it away. So make sure you come in, say how your arguments are still relevant to the debate even after their rebuttal. And this sends a message to the adjudicator that yes, even if they talk about this rebuttal won't be as important because of the reason the deputy leader of opposition said. Remember, the adjudicator is not going to judge the debate on his own merit. The adjudicator is going to judge the debate on what has been spoken about. And in the context of what you guys are talking about, that is the only moment the adjudicator can take into place. The personal beliefs of an adjudicator or whatever they think cannot come into play. If it comes into play, do make sure to give the adjudicator a low score in the edge feedback. But yeah, in the end, remember, this to rebuild and reassure your arguments and make sure they're still standing. Make sure your pillars are still standing and haven't crumbled up. Third of all, you need to provide your arguments. Now, what am I talking about? Your prime minister or leader of opposition cannot come in and give you every single argument there is. Your prime minister and leader of opposition can give you only one, or if they're very good at it, they can give you two. But the chunk of the argument falls on the deputy leader of opposition and the prime minister. If you, as the deputy prime minister or deputy leader of opposition, just come in and rebut through the whole thing, you are not creating your own pillars. If there are three arguments, those are three pillars. If you're coming in and just trying to break their pillars, you're not building the foundation to your building. The two pillars that were supposed to stand it up are not there. So make sure you come in and provide the chunk of the arguments, because if the majority of the arguments will fall on you. The arguments being precise, the arguments being fleshed out are all the responsibility of the deputies, because as mentioned, whips cannot provide new arguments. So whips have to talk about everything the prime minister and the deputy have talked about, or the leader of opposition and the deputy leader of opposition if you're on the opposition side. So make sure you are coming in, giving your arguments, fleshing them out to the best of your possibilities, and make sure these are concise and hit directly at the debate. Again, link it back to why this is so important to the debate that the adjudicator must take it into account. Because in the end, if you say a debate and it's not important, you don't show how that argument is important, the judge cannot take into account why it is important. As mentioned, the judge cannot let his own personal belief come in. So if you come in and say how this is important, that is when the judge knows that yes, these arguments are important and we should take it into account. And that is why this huge chunk of the arguments that the deputies have to tackle is the most important part of the debate taken into context. But do make sure that these arguments are fleshed out. Fourth of all, always summarize, because as mentioned, the adjudicator can miss a point or choose not to write it until you have given them proper explanation as to why this should be taken into account. So make sure the last minute of the debate or the 30 seconds of the debate, if you're very good, make sure you are summarizing your whole speech, what you have talked about, the two arguments that you have talked about and why they're important, the rebuttals that you have provided and why they are important, and make sure this linking back is constant and make sure that this link back is present. Again, linking back is very important since it provides the adjudicator why this is important. So general overview of the structure. First of all, the deputies have to come in and rebut the argument. That is a huge part of their debate, as if you leave the arguments, if you do not rebut it, the pillars are still standing. But you can also do one thing. If you don't want to rebut the whole chunk of it, you can say that you can provide the layers. As mentioned, you can say the layers. You cover two layers, the other two layers will be covered by your whip. Make sure you mention that, because the adjudicator will be expecting it. If you don't mention it, the adjudicator will think that where did this come from? So if you don't want to tackle it as a whole, make sure you provide the responsibility to your whip and say that, specifically mention that. If you have a lot of arguments you need to cover, less time, make sure you say that. And then second of all, reassure and rebuild. Make sure the pillars that you have set upon are still there. Make sure you do not miss a pillar and build a building. Make sure you're rebuilding the arguments. Make sure you're showing that this argument is still relevant. Third of all, most important, provide your arguments. Even if you can't rebut, make sure you're providing your arguments. Say that I have a lot of arguments. I will just cover 1-2 rebuttals. Then the chunk of the rebuttals will be covered by my whip, as it is primarily their job. So make sure you're providing your arguments. And fourth of all, summarize it. So what have we learned? We have learned the roles and structure of a deputy prime minister and a deputy leader of opposition. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment box. And if you liked it, do make sure to share it with your friends.